very honored to have Randy Zwirn with us today, and he's from Siemens Energy. It's going to be a little bit different than some of the talks, but pretty crucial for us to understand this message. And what I want you to leave with is he's got this question in his presentation along the way. What can you do to meet society's needs? And maybe that's what can we do together. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through, as he shares his message today. Again, fourth speaker of the series, and we're just getting a little different piece of the puzzle. You have his bio. We can read through all that, but he's been in the energy business for a long time. He's led engineers. He leads engineers. Right? He does a lot of traveling, maybe too much traveling. It was fun the first time 35 years ago on those trips. But he's global. It's international. And everything they do is about delivering solutions. And that's what he's going to share with you. How do we go deliver solutions? But if you remember the first class, we talked about, hey, why are we doing engineering and why are we doing leadership and innovation? It's because we have some grand challenges to solve. And as Randy shares his story, you can start to pluck off how many of these grand challenges Siemens is working on. So it's great for me to put up this slide to say we got to go solve them. But as I told you at first class, I don't know much about them. Randy's going to help give us some information, give us some insight into what these really mean. And as he goes and shares his story, he's going to ask us to live this mission, right? Because he's going to share all the solutions they're going and doing, that they're working on, that happen to take creativity, innovation, collaboration, and delivery. He's going to ask us to live that mission. Reinforces everything we've been talking about. He's also going to share, hey, you're going to go to school now, but you've got to continue to grow. And so his presentation's a little bit about solutions and energy and global. A lot of advice for us. So again, let's connect the dots and make sure we can pull out what we need from today. So without any other background, further ado, I welcome Randy to the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
So it's a pleasure to be here to talk with you all today. I've been in the energy industry for 37 years, despite this very youthful, appearance. And you're coming in to the world, the economy today. I think for an engineer, it's probably the most exciting time when you look at the transformations that are going on. I'm going to talk about some of them and some of the challenges that we face as society, which frankly, innovation and people will make the difference. So engineering is at the core of a lot of driving those changes. And yeah, if I had one wish, I wish I could be back 35 years ago. Although I'm not sure, maybe I don't want to work for another 35 years. But I think the opportunities that you're going to confront in the next couple of years are so exciting. And all of you have such an ability to make an impact on them. And I'm going to walk you through some of that. So, you think about what we do as engineers, and it really comes down to answering the world's toughest questions. And the world has certain tough questions today. We have a population that's growing. There's going to be 7 billion people on the earth, not too far in the future, in the next 15, 20 years. We have more and more people moving into cities. So the first time in our history on the earth, more than 50% of the world's population is living in urban areas. That's causing issues related to electricity, waste, transportation. How do we deal with these mega cities? China alone has 20 cities with more than 10 million people in them. Shanghai has 25 million people, at least what they generally count. How are we going to deal with those issues? We're dealing in a world where we know the natural resources are dwindling. How are we going to provide energy to fuel the world and do it in a sustainable way? Because you probably all saw pictures from the Beijing Olympics, the amount of pollution that is being generated in some cases by burning fossil fuels or not properly protecting the environment is going to be a critical challenge that needs to be addressed. So, we say in Siemens, this is why we're in business. We're in business to answer the world's toughest questions. And if we do a good job of that, actually, we'll be very successful as a company. So I'm not going to talk to you today about, the things that keep me awake kind of on a day-to-day basis. Events in the Middle East. We've got big footprint, business footprint in places like Egypt or Saudi Arabia or in Libya, and how we deal with that, or the economic crisis in Europe. For sure, that's a big concern for me because I got a business plan. I've got, three main stakeholders in my business. I've got employees, I've got customers that I have to serve, and I have shareholders. And you got to be able to come up with a scenario where all three of those stakeholder groups, which seemingly, maybe when you first think about it, seem like they're in conflict, right? How do you keep employees happy, customers happy, and shareholders happy? Well, you got to have a successful business that, unites the interests of all those stakeholders. And, as engineers, these are the kinds of things that should move you. Because these are the things, these are the tough questions that are facing the world. And we put it more in personalized context. I think A, it should be motivating, but B, it should also be very, very challenging. So before I go into the things that kind of keep me awake at night, kind of thinking of the longer term of the business and what drives our business for the longer term, give you maybe a quick snapshot about Siemens. I mean, we're just across the street. But, Siemens is one of the largest companies in the world. We have over 400,000 employees around the world. We do about $100 billion a year in sales. And we do business in 190 countries around the world. Pretty amazing. Even myself, sometimes as I travel around the world and I look at the footprint of our company, I'm amazed. 160 years we've been doing this. So it's been sustainable, and one of the things I'm going to show you, which I think is clearly critical to your careers, is most of that success is driven by innovation and by people. And we have 4 sectors that we divide our business in, because you might imagine, big, complicated business, lots of divisions, lots of business units. So we try and group that to get the maximum synergies between those businesses and focus on our customers' needs. And so we have basically 4 areas: energy, of which I'm in, the healthcare, industry, and a new sector that we just formed a year ago called infrastructure in cities, because of the fact that we believe that there is a lot that needs to be done in the next 20 years to answer society's questions relative to cities and infrastructure, but also, not that we're doing it because we're social animals, we're doing it because it's a huge business opportunity for us. So we've actually taken the company, reorganized it now into 4 instead of the 3 sectors. And again, just a quick snapshot. You can see how much of the company's business comes from the different sectors, the revenue by region. So we're a very global company. So you may think of us as a German company, an American company, but as I said, actually we do business in 190 countries around the world. And you can see, as I mentioned, 400,000 employees. And by the way, we're a pretty big company here in the U.S. So in the U.S. is actually the largest single country from a revenue standpoint. We have $20 billion a year of revenue we do in the U.S. in those 4 sectors that I showed you. 56,000 employees. We spend $1.4 billion a year on R&D just in the U.S. alone. And we hold 14,000 patents. And, patents are always an important thing. We want a company generating new ideas and then protecting those new ideas for the future. And by the way, we have a pretty big footprint here in Florida, over 5,000 employees. So hopefully you recognize the building across the street and where my office is. Actually, we have 4 buildings across the street where we have, this is our headquarters building. We also have a building where we have our engineering, primarily gas turbine engineering operations with about 1,000 people. We have our renewable energy headquarters there, or our wind turbine business there. And we actually have a shared service center there where we pool together some of the so-called back offices that are necessary to support a business of this size. So almost 4,000 people just across the street. And you can see some of our top customers here in the state of Florida. Hopefully you recognize some of those names. And customers are really important for a business. Without customers, sometimes we forget that the customers are kind of at the center of our world. But without customers, there's nobody to pay the bills. So this is one of the things we continually focus on with our employees, keeping the names and pictures of those customers out in front of them. When you walk through one of our major factories and there's an operation going on a milling machine or a cutting machine, we always have the name of the customer that is a piece of equipment's on that. So even the folks operating the machine tools can see this is, it's not just a piece of metal. It belongs to a customer. We have a deliverable to a customer. And I guess one of the messages is, always remember the customer pays the bills. But let me come back to the two things that I think are the most important things that kind of keep me awake for the long term of our business. As I said, I got to make the quarter-to-quarter numbers, got to deliver the kind of results to the shareholders so the stock price keeps going up. But all of that is a result of longer-term thinking and longer-term strategies that take a company like ours that's been around for 160 years, that keeps us successful generation after generation. And I think about there's really two things that are critically important for the future of our business. Number one is innovation. Innovation drives the business. That's what differentiates us from our competition. That's where we have major competitors like GE and ABB and Philips. So, we drive innovation so that our products are more innovative for our customers, more efficient, better products. And at the core of that is not advertising or marketing, it's innovation. You've got to have the product pipeline. And to have the product pipeline, you've got to have great people. So just starting the discussion today, you asked me what are the two things that keeps me up at night as far as the future of our business to be here for the next 100 years. It's innovation. So that involves, a lot of engineering content, and it's people. I mean, the global competition for talent around the world today is probably the single biggest concern I have, that we continually have an environment that we attract the best and brightest, and once we get you in, we keep you. So I stayed with the company for 37 years, and I can tell you on day one, I wasn't thinking I was going to go work for a company for 37 years. But for whatever the reason, I was challenged, I was given opportunities, I bought into the vision and the values of the company. It's a place where I've, decided to spend, 37 years of my life. And if you look across our business just here, the examples I gave you in energy, in pretty much, and you see here the 5 different divisions we have, in pretty much every one of the businesses where we have market-leading positions, we are a leader in innovation. So fossil power generation, our gas turbines are the most efficient in the world, 61% efficiency when we combine them in a combined cycle power plant. So we're 61% efficient in getting energy out from the primary fuel we're taking in. And that's a huge differentiator when you think of the cost of energy being a primary source of electricity, and also from the standpoint of the environmental impact. In wind power, that Florida maybe isn't the greatest state for wind power. Not that it's not windy here, but we've got certain characteristics to the wind that make the wind a bit turbulent here. So it's not ideal for wind generation. But if you look at other parts in the country, the Midwest, Western U.S., up in New York area, the target of the government is to get somewhere between 15 and 20% of all of our electricity in the future coming from clean renewable energy sources, and wind is one of those sources. And you always hear about we want to become energy independent, and we want to have clean fuels. Well, you don't have to import wind from the Middle East. And by the way, once your turbine is up and running, fuel is actually pretty cheap. It's free. Oil and gas, we're taking you've seen the events at the BP Horizon platform. These big, complex platforms are incredibly difficult to operate. They're extremely expensive. And we're taking all that infrastructure that you see on the top of a platform, and the plan is to move it to the floor of the ocean. So now you have to take all those products and have them be able to operate in an environment maybe 5,000 or 6,000 feet below the surface. And one of the areas where we're investing heavily in is the so-called subsea grid, being able to take the electrical grid that serves all of those platforms and actually put it on the bottom of the ocean. And in transmission, okay, it's all about building more efficient, longer transmission lines that can carry power long distances with very low load losses. But every one of these businesses that we're in today, we're in a leadership position because of where we spent our R&D, where we invested, and those are decisions that were maybe made 7 or 8 or 9 or even 10 years before a product was brought to market. And before I talk further, I also want to talk a little bit about the relationship we've had here with UCF, because it's really a compelling example of how businesses don't succeed alone; they partner, right? So we have a pipeline, but we still need people. We still need research done for us. We partner with the government on research programs, but we've had a great partnership here with UCF. And we moved here in 1983 across the street. I was kidding with, because I actually came here in 1982 before we moved into the new building. And most of you are relatively new students here, but there were 2 things here other than the university, which was much smaller at that time. There was the Nights Out Pub and Pizza Hut. And that's literally all that was on Alafaya Trail. It was a 2-lane road. University was a 2-lane road coming out from the city. Actually, I think there was less traffic then with the 2-lane road than there is today with the 6 lanes. But we had a vision of co-locating out here with a university. It was committed to research, and granted, it was a lot smaller university at the time. I think it wasn't as known well, certainly nationally, as it is today. But this has been a great example of partnership. And these are just some of the things, and maybe some of you have worked on some of these programs, some very, very advanced research and development. It culminated, I think, last year, the year before, where we actually put a Siemens Research Center here on the campus, because you're actually feeding into our innovation and R&D pipeline. So we've spent a lot of money here, but it's not about the money. It's attracting the human capital that this university has been able to attract to the campus and kind of integrating that into our business. And by the way, we have a vested interest in that. And latest track we've had in the last few years, about 500 UCF graduates have come to work with us. We have, I think, 30 or 40 people now involved in master's programs here at the university. And in fact, we have some of our top engineers actually teaching courses over here. So, at the core of why I'm here today is because you guys are really important for the future of our business, because you're going to provide the intellectual brain power to help us keep that innovation pipeline, to help us answer, as I said, the world's toughest questions. And let me come back just shortly to talk about energy for a second, because obviously I've spent 37 years in the energy business. To me, this is one of the most exciting areas, and I think for all of you, it's probably one of the most unbelievable opportunities on the horizon. So 5 years ago, we couldn't have imagined the statement today that by 2020, the U.S. will be energy independent. We're going to be the largest producer of oil in the world, and we're going to have natural gas that not only will be available for us to generate power and maybe even to replace transportation fuels in the future, but probably we're going to be an exporter of gas to the rest of the world. Now think about what that means. I mean, over the last, some of you maybe can't think back 20 years, but thinking back the last 4 or 5 years, you've heard about the impact that high energy prices has on our economy. And now we're shifting in gear to the point where we now have the potential of low energy prices to fuel our economy. We have the ability to have secure energy resources that are here in the U.S. And what that will do is create a huge number of jobs, huge amount of opportunity, if we get this all right. and a huge amount of investment coming from around the world, and we're starting to see that already. And I'm going to show you one really great example of it, because low energy prices are really a magnet for particularly high-tech manufacturing businesses that are very energy independent. And here's an exciting thing. So today, there's about 5.8 thousand gigawatts of power in the world today, installed all around the world. You can see my forecast for 2030 is that's going to grow to 10.5 gigawatts, right? So the world needs more electricity. The world's growing. You know, older power plants have to be retired with new technologies. There can be 7 billion people on the globe. Think about this in terms that what that really means in the next 20 years, we have to double what took us 100 years to build up. So there's going to be a huge amount of investment, and you know, it's probably not going to be in the form of new coal-fired power plants, so there'll be utilization of gas, wind, this whole question of sustainable energy, that we need to generate electricity in a way that is sustainable with what society wants, right? Which is another real requirement for all of you to think about when, you know, in terms of thinking about, you know, what you're going to do, what you're going to design, what you're going to be involved with. In a business like ours, we have to be in concert with society's demands. Because if we have products that maybe fulfill economic needs but don't fill society's future needs, there's going to be a strong conflict there. And you've seen in some places how those conflicts, you know, come out. You see protests in places like Davos, you know, questions on climate change and what's the impact on climate change. So there's a phenomenal opportunity here. However, it has to be done in concert with society's needs. And I think the interesting thing here, you can see fossil fuels aren't going away, right? So clearly, if you look at the mix of what that electricity is going to come from, there's going to be more gas, there's going to be significantly more renewables and wind. Coal will be a less desired technology. In places like the US and in Europe, I think coal use will go down dramatically. But there are, you know, certain markets of the world where industrialization is just taking place, primarily China and India, where coal will continue to be used just because of the economic need. But they too are beginning to feel the pressure of their society's demands, not just to deliver jobs, which is, you know, driving those markets where there's a billion people in the country, but as they develop a middle class and as they, you know, have access to Facebook and the internet, you know, society, even in those countries, are going to demand that that development becomes sustainable. So phenomenal opportunity. There's nothing probably that's going to replace electricity in our lifetime as a primary driver of economic growth. Me, you know, sitting here today, looking at this opportunity going forward, this looks like a really for the United States to be, again, the leader in answering how we're going to address these questions. Let me take you quickly through the U.S. piece of that. U.S. is going already through, I described to you, a fundamental change, unprecedented change, and it's primarily due to shale gas. So hopefully most of you heard of shale gas by now. It's this gas that's trapped in the rock about 3,000 or 4,000 feet down. And what we have found in the U.S., through innovation, by the way, is we thought we had a 20, 30-year supply of natural gas in the country. The ability through innovation to get access to the shale gas, probably a 200-year supply of cheap natural gas. And you can think of natural gas for heating your home. You can think of natural gas for fueling power plants. But how about eliminating transportation, oil as a transportation fuel, and using natural gas in the future for trucking, long-term trucking, for the cars that you drive? I mean, they already do it in parts of the world. By the way, what's missing there is the infrastructure, right? Because you need filling stations that can handle that gas. But that's what we're on the verge of, a fundamental change in the way we use energy in this country, and natural gas, you know, low-cost natural gas is at the core of that. And again, you say, well, that rock's been around a long time. Why all of a sudden did we figure out that we have this huge resource available? And again, it was innovation. So the process of fracking, which you've heard about, a lot of controversy still, is it environmentally safe or not, has been around for 25 years. And they were able to frack, which is basically inject water and chemicals down into these rocks and break the rocks open, which allowed all this gas to escape. But the innovation that came about, and was driven by a company called Chesapeake Energy, was the ability to drill horizontally. So historically, you think of a drill, it goes down this way. Horizontal drilling allows the drill to go this way and spread out like a spider web into these rock formations and to release all this gas. So again, it wasn't the introduction of fracking, which is something that was around for 30 years. It was the innovation of horizontal drilling that, again, from an engineering perspective, really has changed the entire footprint of the future of American energy industry. So this is the impact on the natural gas. If you just look at the price of natural gas today in the US is somewhere around $3 a million BTU. And you can see back in 09, 010, it was as high as $10, $11, $12 a million BTU. And at that point, country was really concerned, we don't have enough gas. It's very expensive. It's going to be very expensive to generate power with. And saw a big introduction of coal plants because, the term back then, it's not that long ago, we were the Saudi Arabia of coal, right? So we need to develop coal. But there's consequences for society of developing coal, and a lot of that has to do with emissions. And you don't hear about the Saudi Arabia of coal anymore today because, low natural gas prices in abundance are really there and available. And you can see already of U.S. production, natural gas production, the shale production has gone from 4% in 2005 to 23%, and we're saying in the next 2 years it'll be at 35%. And obviously huge amounts of money are now being spent on capital to develop these shale fields. So the net result of the innovation, something that's unthinkable 5 years ago. The U.S. will become a net exporter of energy probably in the next 5 to 7 years. Pretty amazing. Renewables really will play a larger role, but renewables are still an industry that are driven by regulation. And I like wind turbines, I like the social aspect of wind turbines, and I think we kind of need an all-in kind of strategy relative to our energy in the U.S. and the world. It's like your portfolio. You don't want to just invest in one technology. On the other hand, I really don't like businesses that are driven by regulation, because regulations change with the political process, and you can see actually here what happens when politicians play around with regulations. In 2012, last year, we had 11,000 megawatts of wind turbines added in the U.S. because we had these production tax credits, which encouraged wind production and clean energy. They expired in the end of 2012. So this year, the entire number of wind turbines built in the U.S. will be maybe 1,000 or 2,000 megawatts. So an entire industry which looked kind of rosy and a great place to be, all of a sudden collapsed because the folks in Washington can't figure out how to get along and pass critically important legislation. So I think wind technology is still an important technology. It's got a very, very strong foothold in Europe, where Europe has already said that they're willing to pay the social costs of having more expensive wind energy because it's clean and it's local. So wind energy won't go away, but again, they make the point between something that's driven by market forces and unfortunately an industry here that's driven by regulatory forces. So one of the things that we in Westinghouse, in Siemens did in the last 2 years is we invested in this brand new power plant, manufacturing plant in Charlotte. 1.2 million square feet. $350 million. Now, you know, the last few years you heard about the decline of U.S. manufacturing and, you know, the decline of the American worker, and we don't invest enough, and, you know, our workers aren't competitive. And, you know, the question someone would ask is, why the heck would you spend all that money in a new manufacturing plant in Charlotte? And let me show you this video, because actually we were asked that question.
Tonight I want to speak about how we move forward and lay out a blueprint for an economy that's built to last. An economy built on American manufacturing, American energy, skills for American workers, and a renewal of American values. Jackie Bray is a single mom from North Carolina who was laid off from her job as a mechanic. Then Siemens opened a gas turbine factory in Charlotte and formed a partnership with Central Piedmont Community College. The company helped the college design courses in laser and robotics training. It paid Jackie's tuition, then hired her to help operate their plant. I want every American looking for work to have the same opportunity as Jackie did. My administration has already lined up more companies that want to help. Model partnerships between businesses like Siemens and community colleges in places like Charlotte and Orlando and Louisville are up and running.
So I still watch it, still sends chills down my spine to, you know. We had an incredible impact with the decision we made to go to Charlotte. We've hired over 1,000 people there now in this new factory. We put a partnership together with as you heard the president say, Central Piedmont Community College, because not every kid in high school is going to have the chance or desires to have the chance to be sitting in this room in a top engineering school. There are kids that are coming up from school that want to work in a factory, that want to do blue-collar work, right? But the skills that are necessary, it's not that they're not capable. The skills that are necessary to have that kind of career are different than 20 years ago, because when you walk through one of our factories today, you don't see hydraulic tools that have to do with how much muscle you have. You see digital tools that require you to be able to run a computer. And absolutely American workers can be competitive in the world if we as companies invest, and we invest in our people, and we invest in innovation. And at the core of our decision to open this factory in Charlotte, number one, we had an existing plant there. We knew the workforce. We looked around at the institutions that were around us. We have, you know, University of North Carolina and Duke, and so everyone thinks of course, the high-end education programs, but the infrastructure with the community colleges there to be able to build our workforce. And by the way, a lot of those kids that have come into a program and get a two-year guarantee, degree will eventually go back for a four-year degree. So when we talk about solving problems, we talk about having competitive factories, we talk about creating jobs. You know, government doesn't create jobs. Companies do. People do. And so I come back to, you know, what I said earlier, innovation and people. Those are the main drivers. We've had, I don't know how many visitors from Washington, senators, governors, the president himself visit that factory to say, well, why did you guys pick Charlotte? I mean, why did you invest all this money? And I think that video, as I said, I think tells the story. So it's all about investing in people in the future, right? It's not financial engineering. It's not having the best marketing program when you're in businesses like ours. That stuff is important. It's about having training at every level of the organization, as said here, and investing in people and innovation. And you can see, just as an example, something boring as an electrical generator, right? It's not boring to the people in our organization to do it, but an electrical generator. You look at the impact that we can have by having a more efficient factory, a 35% reduction in hours per machine, right? We're paying our people in Charlotte, you know, base salaries at the blue collar level, $50,000 a year. They have health care benefits. They have employee share rights, buying shares. This isn't about, you know, kind of hiring people at a low cost. It's about getting the right people, well-trained, motivated. And when you get a 35% reduction in cost of a product by being more efficient, that's going to wipe out any kind of reduction in salary or bringing people in at salaries that don't allow them to have a middle-class wage. So that's what's driving our business. It's people and it's innovation. And when I go around the world to talk to my managers, I break it into 3 categories, the people story. I call it bench, talent, and diversity. So bench, okay, I have 250 positions in my division that are considered corporate critical management positions. For every one of those positions, we have 4 replacements. So 3 replacements if I needed to replace the person today, and a 4th replacement if we've got some talented people we say with the right career steps in the next 3 to 4 years, they could step into that job. And every position in our company up to mine and the CEOs of the company has the requirement that you have to be able to identify the talent to fill those positions internally. And if you don't have the talent, or you have people that are what I call raw talents, what are you going to do to get them to the point where they can cover those positions? By the way, we have a great example of one of those in the room. Vinod Philip was one of those guys in our company. So, I don't know, how old are you now, Vinod? 38? Okay, he's a ripe old age of 38. In the old Siemens, the head of gas turbine engineering, this had to be a doctor, professor, someone in their mid-50s. So, he's turned into a role model in our organization of how you push talented people along and give them responsibility and build great leaders for the future. Talent, what I require is we do an annual survey of our people, and we identify people that are called talents by certain criteria. Then I require that all of my managers interview at least 6 of those people. So we as a management team not only know the people reporting directly to us, but we know the talents, the young talents that are coming into our organization and thinking ahead maybe 2 or 3 cycles of promotions. These are the people we got to push along and make sure that they're gaining the experience. And diversity is, I think, diversity and inclusion, I like to say. We're a global company, so it's not about getting the best talent here in the US or the best talent in Germany. We have to be a magnet for the best talent around the world. And people only want to come to work for you if they feel respected and valued. So on one hand, we say it's diversity, but I like to use the term inclusion. Everybody that comes to work for our company is valued for who they are, and whether it's culture, language, gender, and we try and create an atmosphere where you come to work and you feel comfortable, regardless of what part of the world you come from. And again, it's all about the global competition for talent, right? You've got Chinese companies, Indian companies, American companies, German companies. Who's going to get the talent? Because the talent's going to drive the business. And what I've learned, because I have also 2 kids just coming out of college, that maybe what drives you in terms of what you want to do in your career and how you want was maybe a little bit different than when I came into the workforce. And so part of diversity and inclusion is making ourselves an attractive workforce so that the best and brightest want to come and stay with us. One of the things we instituted was a thing called key expert careers. And what's an expert career? Well, there are people in the organization who want to be the best gas turbine engineer in the world, the best engine designer, right? They don't want to be the CEO of the company. They don't want to be a general manager or run a big plant. So we want to have a career track for people to come into our company, and we call these expert careers, where they can rise to the top of their profession, be compensated, get the kind of recognition in the organization as an expert in the field that they are, and not make them feel that somehow in engineering they're at a second level because they're not in the running to be the CEO. And again, this is getting the best people in, keeping them motivated. And again, to accomplish that, we created these expert careers. And this has been a huge motivator of attracting talent into the organization that maybe otherwise would go into research. And again, it's all about getting and attracting the people's mind. The vision all comes back to the same thing, to provide answers to the greatest challenges of our time. And Here are just some of the things that we're trying to address in the energy sector: efficiency, productivity. In the case of our healthcare business, affordable and personalized healthcare. The budget of the U.S. government will be broken if we don't answer that question. There is no way the country can continue to live with the escalating healthcare costs that we have. Yet we're not willing, and we shouldn't be willing, to compromise on the quality of health care we provide, or the fact that everybody in the country should have access to affordable health care. These are really, and I mean, you read about these in the paper every day. This is the big debate in Washington. These are the toughest questions. And what I'll tell you is, when you come to work for a company like Siemens, what I like to say is innovation is in our DNA. $1 billion in 2012. You look at the number of patents that we have around the world, I think it gives you the feeling why we've been able to be successful since 1866. And a lot of companies have come and gone since then, but Siemens remains a global leader, and it's targeted to be a global leader. We want to be number one or number two in every business that we're in. And the only way is continually innovate and have absolutely the best people who are motivated every day when they come to work. And by the way, when we talk about society's requirements, you hear about green, but green is not just green for the sake of being green. Green is profitable because society is going to demand that our buildings are more efficient, our energy supply is more efficient. We can move people around in cities in a sustainable way. So this isn't just being a nice person, right? A responsible person. This is about where we're going to make money as a company, where we're going to succeed, because you got to balance society's needs and the economic needs of a business. And what I just wrap up to tell you is every business where we're a leader in, we're number one in steam plants in the world. We have the most efficient steam plant technology. We're number one in gas turbines in the world. We have the highest efficiency in gas turbines. We're number one in offshore wind. We've just introduced the largest, most cost-effective wind turbine. So every business where we're a leader, we're an innovation leader. It comes back to what I asked you kind of at the beginning. What can you do to meet society's needs? Because that's what it's all, that's the excitement of what you got in front of you. It's not just about a career. It's about a career, particularly as engineers, that helps us answer these questions. So I just want to digress then real quickly to two other quick topics, because I know most of you probably thinking about how am I going to get a job, where am I going to get a job, what should I do to get a job. And just to kind of wrap up, I want to give you kind of a sense of, I interview a lot of people. Sometimes I interview students, mid-career executives. What are you looking with? So what am I looking for in an employee? Well, you got a feeling from me what the vision of our company is, what the values of our company is. First question is, do you align with that business and values? Do you feel like in your heart that's something that in an interview you can express to the employer that, yeah, you're excited. I have people come interview in our company. They want to work in wind turbines because they believe that renewable energy is really something that they believe in their hearts. What kind of business experience have you, when you have the summers, what have you done with your summertime? Have you looked for internships or work experience that complement your formal education, right? Because we like to see, you got some sense of what the world is really like. And by the way, another way to ask that question is what differentiates you from the other A student that's sitting right next to you, right? Because there's a lot of A and B plus students out there, but we're looking for more than just smart people, because I assume everybody's in this room is qualified to be in this room because you got into this school, which is very demanding, and you've succeeded in this school. So how do you differentiate yourself from all the other people that are coming in to ask for the same internship or the same job or to enter the company? The third part of that, and you got to feel for, is the global framework. So we don't live in an isolated world in the U.S. So have you spent time overseas? Do you speak another language? Do you understand cultures from around the world? How do you fit into the global framework? Summarize it. What experience that you have as an individual, and it doesn't have to be what distinguishes you as a person, right? So I hate to tell you, at the end, it's a very competitive world. So I'm going to go interview 5 people. What distinguishes you from the other 4 people that are coming in? It doesn't have to be work experience, right? It could be some experience in your life. But these are the kinds of things that interviewers and companies are listening for. And then, by the way, it doesn't stop once you have the job, right? So once you have a job, how do you get ahead in the company? The old chimney careers where, you talk directly to your boss and your boss gives you an evaluation and somehow you use that as a vehicle, it's antiquated, right? You got to build networks. I mean, you guys know about that. You sit there with your, you're tweeting all day, and you got to build a network both inside the company and outside the company. The company wants to see that you're bringing your network in, and you have that network to benefit the company. So you're learning from outside. You're bringing contacts in from outside. You're getting context from outside. And you want to think about the early, particularly in your career, when it's easier to move around. How do you develop a kind of a multi-functional career? Different businesses. If you come to a company like Siemens, we're in 20 different businesses. Experience in different businesses and different functions, engineering, accounting, project management, an overseas assignment. If you ask me what I regret, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, I had a fairly fast-track career. I never had the chance of taking the same assignment overseas. Now, I spent half my time overseas, so I've been able to gain that framework. But the experience to live in another culture and think of things outside the framework we have here in the U.S. is critically important, even more so today than it was when I was coming up. Support company values in the community, support diversity, professional society. These are all things that round you out as a person and give you experiences beyond just, as I said, being a really smart engineering student. And hopefully you got a sense what keeps me up at night. Don't let the short term distract from the long-term vision. You got to have an idea where you're going. I always tell my people when they come in, they don't have a good strategy. I say, well, I guess the good news is you don't know where you're going, so you're not going to get lost. But the bad news is you're never going to get there. And so this idea of having a clear, whether it's in your personal or your job or your education, where is it that you want to go? And there may be some zigs and zags along the way, but you got to focus on a long-term vision. And I'm just going to wrap up with one other short video, which is kind of our message at work.
Today is going to be an important day for us.
You ready?
We want to be our brother's keeper. What's number 2 we want to do?
Bring it up to 90 decatherms.
How about you, Joe?
Alex, let's go ahead and bring it online.
Attention on site.
Attention on site. Now starting in 9 minutes.
Some of the world's cleanest gas turbines are now powering some of America's biggest cities. Siemens answers.
So, and feel really good about what you're going to do, so when you come to work every day, you take great pride in what you're doing. Because, I mean, your work life is going to be important. It's going to consume the majority of your years, and you got to be excited about what you do. And you can see after 37 years, I'm still pretty excited about it. So thanks very much. I really appreciate the
Hang with me, I know some got to leave, but let's just connect the dots a little bit with what we're trying to do in here and some of our speakers. So 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, they started to answer their why. Why did they exist as engineers, right? So I'm going to be professorial. I'm going to repeat back to make sure we all got what he said. We in this room are the drivers of the innovation to fundamentally change the world. Do you believe that? That's what he said. Second thing he said is,
I believe that's my job.
is that their job?
Absolutely. If they want to come work for Siemens.
Second, you said we must be aligned to society and sustainability. Do you believe that? Third thing he said, what do engineers do? We answer the world's biggest questions, biggest problems. That's your why. That's why we're here. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. I know as I normally do when I get engaged in what I'm talking about, I run a little bit over, but do we have time for a couple questions?
Absolutely, time for questions. I know some have to go to class. If you have to go, we already talked to Randy ahead of time. If you have to go to class, but I get the first question.
Fire away.
Right, so you talked about customers, right? So you're my customer, these students are my customer. I have this other customer called my boss, right? So these folks are going to be new engineers, and their number one customer is their boss. What's the one or two things they must do to satisfy that boss customer? And maybe what's the one or two things they really shouldn't do?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things we've tried to explain in big companies is you have external and internal customers, right? So at the end of the day, the only customer that's important to the company is the external customer. However, you're going to have internal customers also. And I think the best thing that you can do to satisfy an internal customer is to understand the external customer. Because at the end of the day, we're all basically in business for the same thing. And again, this comes into this need to have this bigger framework. You know, if you're a good engineer, it's not just designing the most efficient, let's say, gas turbine. It's about designing one that's serviceable and cost efficient. And so by having the framework of how your customer, your end customer makes money, you can really help your internal customer understand how to get their job done better. And I mean, that's a real interaction, right? So yeah, you gotta meet the objectives that your internal customer, your boss, gives you. But again, behind the scenes is, you know, hopefully in the majority of cases, that person is driven by an external demand. And making sure you understand that external demand will really, I think, help to meet the internal demands.
Question?
So it takes about 37 years and some hard work to become a president and CEO?
I was president of the Westinghouse power business when I was 40. Right? I'm a little older than 40 now. So I was the youngest president of a division, of a group in Westinghouse at the time. And by the way, when I came into the company, that wasn't necessarily my aspiration. So again, one of the things, hopefully you get the feel of, that I got from my experience is I'm trying to drive already at a much younger age into our talent pool the focus to develop the broad experience early, right? Because if you want to be a CEO, you got to know more about the business than just your chimney. So drive that in earlier. Give people experience. Get them in 2 or 3 different businesses. Get them out of the United States to go sit and, you know, understand what it is to do business in China, right? Because if you're going to compete with the Chinese on the market, and by the way, we don't have any competitors in any of this high-tech stuff that are Chinese, right? But if you're going to compete with somebody, you better go sit over there and understand how their culture thinks and what motivates them and how to beat them. So yeah, part of it is pushing ourselves, and that's why I say the old hierarchical approach where you have a relationship with your boss and you wait for him to tell you what your next assignment is kind of old. It's not the way you should approach your career. You got to have a plan. What is it you want to do? What are the pieces that you want to get together that differentiate you down the road? And yeah, I mean, if you got to wait to my age to become the CEO, it's too late, because in the company today they'll say, well, that's not a person we want to invest in the CEO. We want somebody with a longer runway is the politically appropriate way to say it today. They don't say you're too old or too young. You got to have a long runway or a short runway, right? So our goal is to really challenge the workforce sooner and really see who rises to the top out of that.
Thank you. Jared Walk, computer engineer. I could probably hit you for an hour with questions, but probably the one that, and I understand if you can't talk about it too much, but Stuxnet, having demonstrated the vulnerability of industrial controls to cyber attack, is this a growing concern for Siemens? Is this something that you're going to be preparing for in the future? And how has that affected your workflow in power generation?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely, it's a huge concern. And by the way, Stuxnet was introduced through a Siemens process control system in Iran, right? So, I mean, that's other than what I saw on CNBC or on 60 Minutes. But you know, they're walking through this site, and all of a sudden you see Siemens over there. So no, it's a huge concern. And one of the things we highlighted to our CEO is that with all the controls we have and all the firewalls on our computer, and by the way, we got a lot of firewalls. I go start my computer in the morning, it takes, I don't know, 20 minutes to boot up because of all the firewalls we have. But we went and we had some professionals go in and hack into our computer. They were able to hack into the BlackBerry of the CEO. They were able to hack into our accounts payable system. They actually made a fraudulent, money transfer. We're very concerned about the protection of our IP, so we know from the latest stories that you have these hacking groups in China that are literally focusing on hacking in to steal IP. So it's a huge topic. And in fact, there was a meeting at the White House last week, of which Siemens was one of the companies that was invited to address the National Security Council, and the President personally attended, on the threat coming from cyber attacks and stealing of intellectual property. So yeah, I think it's something that we're extremely vulnerable on as a society. I mean, again, you think about what I talked about, the change and evolution in energy policy. Can you imagine maybe the war 20 years from now isn't fought anymore with soldiers landing someplace. It's getting a nuclear power plant to explode, or just by manipulating IT codes. So it's a huge issue, and I think we're behind the 8 ball on it. So we're behind where we need to be. And yeah, companies and obviously the government itself is extremely concerned, and we are spending a lot of time on issues to make sure, at least from our standpoint, our intellectual property is protected and our systems. But I mean, the government is spending a lot of time on it and working with business, companies like Siemens that are leaders in IT automation, to make sure that the country is safe from a cyber attack.
Good afternoon, sir. In the coming decades, as we approach Hubbard's peak of oil discovery and usage, will natural gas be an effective replacement for transportation fuels of the future as it becomes more and more necessary, like a larger population, without it just being a Band-Aid until we run out of that?
Well, I think the first thing the natural gas would do is significantly reduce the U.S.'s carbon footprint, which I think is something we need to do. And I think the rationale of why we haven't moved further in the short term is, well, there's a cost to that. When you have 9% or 8% unemployment, focus needs to be on getting people working. But the potential to use natural gas to replace oil as a transportation fuel, right, is a huge opportunity. So there's already the capability for interstate trucking to be fueled almost exclusively by natural gas. What's missing, of course, is the infrastructure. They got to stop someplace. They got to refill. So the transformation of natural gas to not just be a source of fuel for heating and power generation, but as a logical extension to replace oil, which is actually seemingly today having less anyway of a potential life reserve, but also having a much more negative carbon footprint. I think the potential is huge. But again, it's going to take investment. But I see that as another one of those transformations that for sure is staring us in the face. Something we didn't think about 5 years ago. It shows you how fast innovation can change the playing field.
So Randy, you mentioned something that reminded me something about the president, and you showed the video on Siemens. So, by the way, we are a presidential group. If you do the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, 2 out of our 3 speakers have a direct connection to the president. You're the second one. Don't forget about that. It's important. Mm-hmm. Hey, so what we'll do is maybe we'll move kind of informal. Okay. And we'll just, if you want to come talk, we'll just do kind of one-on-one, the same way we've been doing before. Perfect. And then we'll kind of dismiss class, I guess. So, Randy, thank you very much.
Appreciate all your attention. I hope you're all fired up. Thank you.